We're all good. Okay, good evening. It is 5:30 PM Tuesday, January 6th, 2026. And this regular meeting of the Sandpoint Planning and Zoning Commission is now called to order in council chambers at City Hall, 1123 West Lake Street, Sandpoint, Idaho. For the record, I am Commission Chair Mose Dunkel presiding. Also present are Commissioners Wayne Benner, William Mitchell, Reed Weber, Scott Torpy. Do we have Ivan? Ivan is remote. Ivan Ramar. Commissioner Grant Simmons is absent. If everyone will please stand, we will recite the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do commission members have any announcements or reports? One announcement?
Don't get the flu. It's nasty.
Okay,
Just FYI.
second thought. We don't need a motion for that, right? Okay, next we will begin with the election of board chair and vice chair. Do we have any nominations or anyone who would like to volunteer to or be nominated for either of these positions? For the record, I would make myself available for the chair position again.
Mr. Chair, I would move that we keep the same chair and vice chair for this next year and move that as a motion.
I second it.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. And both positions have been, can we do that? 2 and 1? Why not? Okay, moving forward as the same way we did this last year. Okay, consent calendar. We will now proceed with the consent calendar at this time. I will entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar as presented.
Second.
So we need a motion first.
I thought you moved.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, here we go. We're getting the hang of it. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
No, we need a roll call vote, don't we? Or not?
No.
Okay.
Okay, once again, all in favor.
Is there technical difficulties going on?
Oh, nice. Is he muted? Or maybe muted him.
Maybe if you hear this himself, maybe that'll help.
Yeah, try muting items, see if that works. That helps.
Oh,
There we go.
Thank you, Betty.
Ivan will unmute you. Speak. Sorry about that, Chair.
okay, we'll proceed. Once again, all in favor for consent calendar.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes and consent calendar is approved. Before I read all this, do we have any matters from the public or general announcements that would like to be made? Okay, we're going to skip that. Okay, and we have no public hearing tonight and also no old business. So we'll move on to a discussion of commercial A zoning and historic preservation. I will yield the floor to Deputy Director of Community Planning and Development, Bill Dean.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. For the record, this is Bill Dean. First of all, Happy New Year. Really great to be with you. We're going to be busy this next few months. Just to really, this conversation this evening is really a precursor and a warm up to actually conducting some pretty intense review of the commercial A zone district and looking at what we've done with historic preservation in terms of a draft ordinance, and then conducting hearings on this. So we want to move this thing along to City Council in an expeditious way, but also be very thorough and mindful of the amount of work that it takes to do this, and to make sure that we're hearing voices that want to participate in this. And I'm really pleased to see that we have members of the Arts, Culture, and Historic Preservation Commission here in attendance just to listen in. Really what this presentation is tonight, and it's really a discussion. The last minute, Jason and I threw together some slides to help sort of guide that discussion. This is not a hearing, but rather tonight I want to just encourage you to just be really open-minded in your thinking. We really just want to strip down our zoning and our regulations and just sort of put it all aside for a second and ask ourselves what it is that we're trying to do with downtown. And so that's really what this conversation, this discussion is about tonight. And I think the slide deck hopefully will sort of help explain what I mean by that in terms of just let's forget about what we've got on the rule book right now and let's kind of reinvent what it is we could be doing. So let's go to the next slide here, Jason, please. Okay, so talking about downtown, right? So downtown, commercial A, historic preservation. We're talking about accelerating this place as an activity center, a unique destination. That's what it is. And it's really important, I think, to keep this, at the forefront of our minds, especially as we pull up and look at the zoning map and ask ourselves, what it is that we've got on the books today. We're trying to increase the share of the regional investment, whether that's in restaurants or shops or entertainment, arts, culture. This is really the beating heart of the city. And so when we think about that and we allow ourselves to not be confined by the rules that are in the books today, your mind begins to open up a little bit in terms of how we might want to organize ourselves. And really, that's what tonight's discussion is about. And certainly, when you're doing this, you're talking about the full complement of a mixture of uses. But we have to be careful of that. And this presentation is going to share with you some of my thinking and where I'm concerned and where I think we could head with some new ideas. So let's go to the next slide. So what I want us all to do, and this is not something that we're going to have a decision point on tonight, but rather it's a conversation. We're beginning this process. I want us to rethink commercial A. I want us to ask ourselves, downtown, where is it? You've got an area that I think a lot of people identify and say, yeah, that's downtown. And then you could be a block or two away and someone would say, yeah, that's not really downtown, but yet their zoning map says it is. So we need to address that. If we're going to be successful in relooking at commercial A, we have to understand what commercial A is covering an enormous swath of the city, and it's the same rules that are being applied to the very periphery as they are to the same rules are being applied right down on Cedar and First. And I just don't think that's necessarily what we want in our zoning ordinance. There's also an area that's right around downtown that's the primary contributing geography to the downtown success. And I want to talk about that. And once we enable ourselves and give ourselves the freedom to sort of break out of commercial A, all kinds of good things can happen. We just have to free ourselves from some thinking. So that's really what this is about. If you're at Fifth and Larch, and you're standing there looking at the Safeway parking lot, or maybe some uses across the street from there, that's the exact same zoning that is at First and Cedar. Why? Why we have the same set of development regulations and zoning and aspirational statements in our codes for those two areas that couldn't be more different. It's certainly Safeway, from everybody I've asked, is not downtown. Yet it enjoys the same structure and status in our zoning ordinance as downtown. There's nothing to separate it from what we're trying to do on First and Cedar or Church or Oak down there. So once we just recognize that and sort of cast a light on that, and give ourselves the freedom to think a little bit differently, we can change some rules. So let's go to the next slide. So the key steps in this, and I've taken a stab at this with Jason and other staff at City Hall to identify the core downtown, identify the main contributing area to downtown, and then we need to redefine or refine the regulations to fit a downtown context and identity. The same regulations that will yield you a Safeway, which is valuable to the community, we need a different set of rules that regulate land use and planning and development on Oak and Second. You need different tools if you want to achieve Oak and Second type development as compared to something you might see along Fifth. And that's really the biggest step forward, is to make sure that we can agree upon what the downtown is, what its main contributing area is, and then write some rules that are going to fit the context, those two separate contexts. Let's go to the next slide. So whereas before last year, in talking and warming up to historic preservation and commercial A overhaul, a lot of talk of overlay districts. I think we need to have an overlay district for historic preservation. We have a slide in here tonight. We can talk a little bit about that. It sort of runs down all the things that overlay will achieve, and I can talk about that with some specificity. But really what occurs to me is I don't think we can achieve what this community needs to achieve with commercial A by just having a larger overlay over another subset of commercial A. I think we need to free ourselves from commercial A zoning and ask ourselves, what do we want the zoning for downtown to be? And what do we want the zoning for a major contributing geography to be? Once you open the zoning code and you start looking at commercial A, you're brought into the commercial A structure, you're brought into the commercial A thinking, you're brought into the commercial A rules and regulations. What I'm proposing is that we create two new zoning districts to define our downtown as the downtown core and the downtown outer core. And each is going to have a unique role in that structure of how we expect and what we could see for future land development downtown and opportunities. So two new zoning districts for your downtown. This is going to be a lot to consume tonight, and that's why I didn't want to make this a public hearing. This is going to lay on some ideas for you, and then in subsequent conversations, I'm going to bring in these rules, and I'm going to share with you some of those rules tonight because one of the bigger ones has to do with building heights, and we're going to share some ideas tonight that we think are appropriate given what we understand about this downtown and what our comp plan says and things we've heard in public testimony and other settings related to development in downtown. We're just going to kind of go there tonight and throw some ideas out there. But that's what we do tonight with some of these ideas is just one or two constituent pieces of what would be a more thorough description of development standards and regulations and guidelines in these new two zoning districts, which is largely written. Jason and I have been busy writing what would be the downtown core zoning district and the downtown outer core. There's some subtleties in what we're doing to distinguish between the two, and we're going to talk a little bit about that tonight. But the big thing I want you to get your head around is we have to take our downtown and put it in its own geography, put it in its own set of rules as compared to everything else that is commercial A. Let's go to the next slide. So downtown core versus downtown outer core, we're going to show you some geographies in a minute, but one of the big things that we're going to have to, come to terms with is, what happens on the ground floor in your downtown core matters. It matters a lot what happens. This is not a situation where you want to have just every type of commercial activity occur in your actual core of your downtown. This is your main space for the forces of cumulative attraction and to have activity generating land uses concentrated as much as you can in your core. That's what makes it a core. The outer core, a little bit less. There's some more leeway you can have with the land uses that can be supportive there. Right now, we have 200 plus acres of commercial A zoning, and all of it, every square inch of it requires commercial space on the ground floor. That's a lot of commercial space, for a city of, just shy of 10,000 people. And that's just by virtue of it being in commercial A. So let's ask ourselves, well, what is downtown? What are these areas that contributed towards its success? And what's appropriate to see on the ground floor here? What can really help make downtown better? So let's go to the next slide. So again, we should have our downtown zoning really focus on activity generating land uses. And that may surprise you in terms of what that actually is and what it's not. Just outside of that, just outside this band of what is really the core of the downtown, we should broaden and allow ourselves to think about this idea of having ground floor residential. Now, again, having the right frontage on these streets just outside of, the main core area is really important. We have to have guidelines and standards. So you have a type of multifamily or residential development to be fitting of this area of town. It's not the same as something you'd see out on Highway 2. So it has to have a frontage type of regulation we'll write into these zone districts that help us understand and ensure that we have some guidelines that bring us toward seeing the types of development that would be befitting for downtown. So let's go on to the next slide. So we need to have building height, building frontage type, building materials. They have to be carefully integrated into these zone districts. And we're going to try to be as objective as possible here when we write these standards. But we're going to discern between what happens on the core and what happens in the outer core. That's really, in dropping these ideas on you tonight for a discussion, purposefully not giving you the whole ordinance because it's going to be overwhelming all in one shot, but rather here's this idea to free ourselves from commercial A, to allow ourselves to think about it a little bit differently, and then bring in from commercial if it works. We're not just going to throw it away because it's there. We're going to use most of it. We're just going to do some refinements. And we're going to add some categories of regulation that are going to really be clear, especially on building frontage type and building materials, so that we have a pattern that's recognizable and consistent with what we already see there today. Let's go to the next slide. On historic preservation, we have written a new historic preservation code. It's written. It needs to be refined a little bit. We create a new historic overlay district. We actually have regulations in there for also individual historic landmarks that are outside the district. The ordinance does both. And it's going to be up to the Arts, Culture, and Historic Preservation Commission, this commission, as well as council, ultimately decide, is that what we want? Right now, out of the gates, we're going to be relying on the Secretary of the Interior standards for how development within these districts or landmarks has to be undertaken. There will be special processes and permits, notably a certificate of appropriateness that is issued by the commission for qualifying projects that need to go through review. And all of this stems from the great work that was done in 2018 and thereabouts to create the Arts, Culture, and Historic Preservation Master Plan. So we have written an ordinance that does exactly what this plan asks it to do. And I think we've gone a step further by saying not only is it just the district, but we're creating a structure, should council choose to do this, to actually have these regulations apply to individual landmarks as well. So it's all this, by virtue of having these sets of rules, will be protected from change unless that change has been authorized by the commission. Okay, so let's take a look at how we've designed these two new geographies for downtown. So the purple, all this used to be purple. So the purple is commercial A. And what we've done is taken some of that purple and created a downtown core and then an outer core. And there's some subtleties and differences in the allowable land uses and things like that would occur here. We've walked this boundary. We've talked about this boundary. We've driven this boundary. Several city staff members and myself fussed over this for a long time and really asked ourselves, what makes, and these boundaries, by the way, are something that we're going to want to have a discussion with you, tonight about. But that doesn't mean it's your only opportunity to comment on this. This is something that's going to be, talked about, I think, probably a lot as we go forward. We retain the periphery of commercial A, and I think what we're going to do with the intent here is to really focus on the rules and regulations that really are befitting for the core and the outer core, what we really want to see in these areas, and we'll leave the rest of commercial A to sort of, we can make additional tweaks down the road. I don't think you rezone and take on a project this size and try to get it right in one in one shot, I think it stands to reason that we might want to focus on the core and the outer core. And then if there's additional tweaks and changes to regulations for the balance of commercial A, we can do that. We're going to show you where we retain standards and where we deviate from standards. But these geographies really matter. We really fussed over where are the principal activity generators in this city, and where should we protect those ground floor spaces from the types of land uses that don't contribute to activity generation. So we're going to regulate land use, certainly by virtue of having a zone district. And that might be a little bit different in the outer core. I think I mentioned the outer core. This is where you want to see some residential development. Right now, you're required to have ground floor residential. And a lot of it, as we've seen in past applications, is just tokenistic. There's no real rules around it. It's just tokenistic. Yeah, we'll have a 10-foot deep corridor in the front of the building we'll call commercial just to satisfy the requirement. It's not really true ground floor, retail space. And I would argue, without having a formal forecast of demand for retail land uses, I would argue that we have decades of supply available to us in the downtown core for retail space. And then you add to that what you see in the balance of all the other commercial zone districts, and even in the outer core, we've got plenty of retail space to accommodate future needs in this community. But these two geographies are really, really, really important. The next slide's going to show you how we lay on top of that the historic district boundary. The overlay for the historic preservation through the historic preservation ordinance would encompass the areas either shaded in white, and that is directly taken from the boundary that has already been created through that 2018 master plan. We're just bringing that forward. This is on the National Registry. It just now would be locally adopted via zoning action to put in our code and codified. These areas would have to adhere to whether we're going to talk about things like contributing versus non-contributing resources. Not every building in theirs is the same level of historic character and quality, and is not. So the ordinance is going to help us discern between what are called contributing and non-contributing resources. And when you're modifying these structures, you're going to have to go through special permit process with the Arts Commission, Historic Preservation Commission, before you do anything to these buildings. This is how it fits in with what we've identified as a new zoning district for downtown core and outer core. This is sort of where these structures exist. Let's go to the next slide.
Can I ask?
Oh, sure.
So is that only on one side of First Ave?
The district, it is.
Okay, so it's not the east side of.
Correct.
Okay.
With the exception of the Canada.
Okay.
And that was because a lot of the structures were built in the 70s.
Yeah.
They're not historic. They didn't meet at the time, they didn't qualify for inclusion in an historic district. But that doesn't mean we can't write rules in the downtown core that sort of push us in the direction of buildings and structures that evoke the same sort of character that you see within the district. Some of the next slides are going to be pretty provocative, but we're going to go there anyway. Let's go to the next one. So land uses. So right now we have commercial A, B, and C. We're going to be adding under this proposal a downtown core and a downtown outer core, and just some refinements, subtle refinements, but significant refinements in what's allowable in terms of land uses. We didn't, go through and create new categories of land uses. We have to keep this exercise somewhat contained instead of rewriting the entirety of this thing. We decided let's clarify, let's amplify where needed. And what you're seeing here is just a red line. We were removing words like yes and using the more commonly used term P for permitted or N for not permitted.
Just for members of the Historic Preservation Commission who are here, if a word has a strike through, it's something that's in current code that we're proposing elimination of, and anything underlined is being added. So all those strike through yeses, they're being replaced with a P for permitted, which is what we use across our zoning code. So we're just kind of standardizing the language we use in our zoning to bring it into line with how we, distinguish between permitted and unpermitted uses.
Thank you, Jason, for that. So yeah, I just excerpted this from the draft I have on my desk right now of the code that we're redlining, and when we dumped it into the PowerPoint. But that's exactly right. So it looks like a lot of change. We're just simply, changing yes to P. But the two right columns are significant. Um, so basically, yeah, I think what's important are the notes. The notes are not on this table. We did not put them in the PowerPoint. But what's significant that I want to just pause on really quickly, and this is going to be fun. Note number four, if that's a number four, for banks and financial institutions. Actually, it's not on that one. It's later on. Offices number 9, down on offices number 9. Yeah, clearly offices you want. These are activity generating land uses in your downtown. However, in the downtown core, note number 9 says no real estate offices allowed in the core on the ground floor. Rather, those would be allowed in the outer core. And currently, there are 6 real estate agents' offices in the core. So they would become non-conforming land uses. I've heard over and over and over again, why is it that we have dozens and dozens of real estate agents? There should be some kind of a limitation on these. So we're being provocative tonight, but I think it's actually not just to be provocative, but that's a type of office building that can be challenging in terms of trying to classify it as an activity generating land use compared to like a coffee shop or a restaurant or like a bank that's got a high volume of traffic.
Bill, is this an exhaustive list of commercial uses? Or?
No, there's another couple pages.
Oh, okay.
Here's the next page.
Oh.
Here's the next page. And this is taken out of the current code we have today. And I think it ends with bed and breakfasts. So I think the big changes here when you get down to the residential section, that last section, what we're saying here is that in the core of downtown, you can have multifamily residential provided that's on the upper floors. And you can have ground floor multifamily residential as a permitted use in the outer core. The outer core is the rightmost column. The downtown core is the one to the left of it. And that's a big change. That's a big change from what we see in commercial A. Again, we've got 200 plus acres of commercial A that say everything has got to be ground floor retail. It's got to be ground floor commercial space. And this breaks that up and says, no, you want to have population, you want to have people in your really proximate to your main core area. That's the number one generator of activity in your downtown, is to have people that are proximate to it. So you have that disposable income right next to it. So people, make that their special place to go. So you want to enable, not everybody is a mixed use developer. Not everybody builds mixed use buildings. It's a much more complicated and expensive type of construction. Why not just allow the vertical or the horizontal mixed use in this area that's just proximate to our main core? These are things obviously that when we finalize the draft, we're going to send it to you ahead of time so you have time to look at it, and there'll be hearings on all this. But the couple big ideas tonight are: one, freeing ourselves to have some new thinking about the geography of downtown. Number two, just refining some land uses to help concentrate activity generating uses in your core and enabling some additional flexibility in the outer core for residential uses. And let's go on to the next slide.
Bill, do you happen to know what footnote 10 says?
And that's on which
Or
one?
religious institutions and places of worship in the downtown core.
Second floor only. Number 10 is second floor only. Yep. So we have decided to throw out there a recommendation for building heights across your commercial A zoning. Right now, you've got 65 feet in commercial A. We would retain that. But again, most of your downtown won't be commercial A any longer. It'll be downtown core or downtown outer core, where the limit is 45 feet. Commercial B and C, we just modified that to be 45 feet. And the reason why is you take a look at what has been built over the last several decades out there. And I've got a couple of slides that follow here that show that show some of the more, more familiar, taller buildings, and everything is under 45 feet with the exception of the Sandpoint Business Center. But I will say that on the bottom, we've added a row there called relational height requirement. What we're going to be introducing is this idea that whereas you may be allowed, for example, to go to 45 feet, the way the relational height is going to work is that if you're next to an existing single story structure, you're allowed to go to that existing height plus 2 stories. That's it. So, and that's one way you can do coding, but it begins to create a stepping in your building size. You're not going to have a 45-foot tall structure next to a single story. It would be single story plus 2 stories is allowed next door. And there's a bunch of other rules that go along with this, but I know this has been a big hot topic, but what happens when you just free yourself from the bondage of commercial A and you ask yourself, what it really is, this special character in downtown? You look at all of it, the land uses, the regulations that lead to it, the building heights, the form, the massing, all that stuff. We need to have rules. I think our comp plan is telling us that we're trying to protect and enhance a character that's there today. And you're balancing that with investment. And we're saying, great, we're not going to shun investments for folks who want to do these taller buildings. We're just deciding as a community that there's a place for that, but it's not really right here. So we're not saying no, we're just saying that we're deciding that there's an area where that might not be exactly appropriate. And this is based on everything I've heard in the last year and a half. So again, provocative, but this is the way we're heading. And tonight we wanted to start off the year with a bang and get moving forward. These are some images of the buildings for some of the taller structures. The MS building is 33 feet tall. Let's go to the next one.
That's the new one?
Yeah.
Oh.
The Homestead apartment building is 34 feet tall. In the Mountain West Bank building is 45 feet tall. And then you've got the Sandpoint Center, which is 65 feet tall. It's as tallest outside of the Seasons along the water, and the Granary, which is about 80 plus feet tall next to Evans Brothers. You've got this. This being located in the outer core would be a non-conforming to building heights, for example, if this were to go forward. But such a structure would be allowed in commercial A and other areas. So I think that's the last slide I have. We've been busy. We've been listening, and we have been, we really want to get this right. And maybe this isn't the right answer, but I don't think overlays are going to get us there. I think we need to do some new zoning for our downtown. I don't think you can get there with the overlay. I think that's a great tool for the historic preservation. It's very unique, and it's very common to do it that way. We need new zoning for our downtown. And so with that, Chair, I'm going to turn it over to you to begin this discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Commissioners have any questions for staff?
I just have a
Commissioner
suggestion.
Forby.
Comes to mind is the table, Bill, that you showed for a moment there with the 3 pages. It would be helpful for me I was trying to do it in my own head, what is actually changing between what is now commercial A and then you're taking a subset and you're creating these two other zones, DC and DOC.
That's a good question. Let me just walk you through. Yeah, let me walk you through this version of the table. It's right there, laundromats in the middle. So laundromats, no in the downtown core, but yes in the outer core. On this page, there's that. And manufacturing, it's ancillary to a storefront retail. Like if you were a chocolate manufacturer, for example, we just want downtown for retail, shopping, restaurants, entertainment, office buildings. That's what you want. So there's a difference there. Whereas today in commercial A laundromat would be allowed, and so would manufacturing that's ancillary to a storefront. In downtown, we're saying, just in the core, we're saying no to those two things, so we can free that space up for the other land uses that are allowed. So let's go on to the next page and show you the other differences. So the differences here are on religious institutions and places of worship permitted, but in the core, upper floor, right? So it'd be allowed on upper floors only. So you free up that ground floor retail space and for, a true, activity generating space.
Sales.
And then you've got, let's see, where is that, Jason? Oh, it's up. Yeah, it's like the third line down. Yes. So vehicle equipment sales, not something you want in your downtown. That's something that happens to the periphery of your downtown or farther away. Um, that's a change. And just wholesaling. I visualize wholesaling. What does that mean? It could be a bodega full of sacks of flour. That's not exactly, wholesale is not necessarily the activity generation that you're trying to put, again, one special slice of our city. One special slice. If everything is special, nothing is special. And that's the problem with commercial A. Let's create something special and put rules around it. Can you go back to the table? There's
There's more, no.
there's more. So going down the list, we have right here, we've got duplexes not allowed in your core, not allowed in the outer core. Single family attached, not allowed in your core. That's a difference.
Keeping in mind, recently in our Title IX updates, we distinguished in our updated definition section the difference between single family attached and duplexes. Single family attached are individually platted, privately owned units. Duplexes are 2 units on a single lot. So you think about what a duplex in a residential neighborhood looks like, then you think about more of kind of an urban brownstone type unit that's on its own lot, similar to what a historic downtown commercial building might look like. But there's residential in that building.
And I've been really careful tonight not to use the word urban, right? Because I don't know if that's the right term. I thought about it. I've thought about it a lot. It's a great word, right? But what we can use those labels later. But what I think what I'm trying to do here is encourage us to have a little bit of new thinking in terms of how we organize. Our planning is an exercise of organizing ourselves, right? How are we going to organize our land resources? And what are we going to, labels matter? What we call them matters, because attached to that label is emotion, attached to that label ultimately is a bunch of regulations. It's both. So I think this community has a lot of interest and passion over the generations for downtown. I think it's time to call a place downtown and label it so that we can then begin to ensure the right rules are in place so that it can continue. That's what this exercise is about. And in there, some of these slight changes, when you begin to ask yourself, what place do we want to try to concentrate the most these activity generating uses? If you're only going to get a certain number of them, the market's only going to supply a certain number, where are we going to guide that? And it's still a big swath. The downtown core is still pretty huge, given the size of Sandpoint, but it's certainly a minor subset of what would be, otherwise would be commercial A, because it's special. It's okay to call it that. It's special. It's different. The only other change I see here, Commissioner, is the residential care homes and facilities not permitted in the core, but allowed in the outer core. Again, primary core is your walk, shop, eat, entertain atmosphere. And offices can contribute to that, but some offices are a little bit different than other offices. That's why we sort of called out what we call out the real estate offices, because that was specifically brought to our attention as being a concern. But this is obviously just a first step in this direction. What you're going to see after this is you're going to start to see draft red lines of code sections. We're going to bring the commercial code to you to review, probably do a thorough walkthrough like we've done with the parking, and then ultimately hearings, right? So let's hear some more from the commission.
Accessory dwellings, it looks like it's permitted now, but then would not be permitted in either.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. Reason being, there were that's typically associated with a single family detached residence. It didn't make sense to me to confuse the issue there, just be very clear.
It's interesting though. I agree. That's what I thought. But currently in commercial A, it's detached single family residences are prohibited.
Well, here's the problem with the current
Accessory
language.
dwellings are permitted. So
Well, it doesn't say that. It says accessory dwellings which existed on the effective date hereof. This is not something, you don't need that language in your land use table. The reason why is because you have a whole section of your code entitled in chapter 9 called non-conforming provisions. It's just not the place to have this type of regulation. Of course you can have what's on the ground today. No one's going to show up with a bulldozer and tear it down. Of course you can have that. You have a whole section of code that deals with non-conforming structures. So this is weird how it was tucked in here. So living again, we didn't want to rewrite the whole of it. Living within the structure we have, it made absolutely no sense. And that's why I crossed that language off.
Just a clarifying question, Bill. Accessory dwelling units can be accessory to duplexes and
Single family homes.
larger multifamily residential units can have an ADU as well.
Uh,
New ADU be built if a duplex is a permitted land use?
I don't believe so. We'd have to check that. I don't have committed to memory the accessory dwelling rules on
They can
multifamily.
be built as an accessory to a duplex. So we are saying that new duplexes can be built in the commercial zones.
Taking a
They're
step,
accessory to a
to
dwelling.
answer the question, what do you want to see in your downtown?
No.
And ADUs didn't make my list. It didn't even make my list for the contributing area around. This is, I'm not going to use the word urban. This is more urban than that. This is our one urban district, if we want to call it that. It's not urban like Seattle. It's urban like Sandpoint is urban. This is our most urban that can qualify that area. And so when you're in your most urban area, you want to have more intense development. You can talk about intensity. You can talk about, these rules we don't see them on the screen here, but commercial A is about filling the four corners of the lot. That's not going to change. We have some subtleties we're going to introduce for commercial B and C as it relates to setbacks and things like that. But this is about creating an urban form where you're filling the lot. There's going to be, if you're going to do ground floor multifamily in the outer core, you're going to be at property line or maybe 5 feet back, provided there's a certain frontage type, stoop type, appearance to the building that's befitting. So I don't think ADUs fit.
Can I ask you a question?
Commissioner Mitchell.
Why you're excluding real estate office? Just kidding.
We're good.
No, but what I mean is like, what if there's 6 jewelry shops on First Avenue? Are you gonna restrict the permitting of those or?
I'm not going to restrict anything. So this is not me. I don't want to personalize it to me restricting anything. What I'm trying to introduce
What are you
is,
gonna do it? Sorry.
is it in the city's interest to create some zoning where we start to look at, some of the gradations of activity generating uses? Typically, we don't get involved in the market. Do we need another grocery store? Well, how many grocery stores do we have? And what's the typical, what's the margin on groceries? 1-2%? I mean, what are we doing with that? We don't do studies like that to say, no, I'm sorry, you can't, we don't think you're going to be successful. Don't come in. The criticism I've heard about real estate agents is that all they are is a bunch of pictures on the window, and that the real estate agent's out doing their business, and there's that pattern, that fenestration, that window space is taken up with essentially dead space. There's no activity going on around there. The comings and goings of the drawing of customers like you would in a jewelry shop, for example, or an ice cream shop or something. It's not the same. Banks are a little different because it's more transactional like that the periodicity of transaction is higher. And that's really what this is about. It's about the periodicity of transaction. And you miss that with certain land uses. And frankly, real estate office has been called out because it just doesn't have that. It's great. I love looking at the pictures, right? Wow, look at that place down on Odin Bay for sale. Woo! But
That you can't afford.
that I can't afford. We all like looking at that stuff, but we're trying to arrive at activity generators. And that's what's driving us. We can erase number 9, we can erase number 10. But I want you to think, really what I want you to think about, in addition to those details, because they matter, those details absolutely matter, is first of all, are we on the right track with this thinking? Because if we're not, I'll disappear and come up with something else. But this is, I do think this is what we need to do. But if it's not landing, then I need to hear that.
Commissioner Benner.
Couple different questions. First of all, if you're going to pick on real estate, what about attorney offices? It used to be downtown was full of attorney offices.
Hey, I'm not picking on anybody here tonight. I'm trying to make a case for activity generation.
No, I do on the, how were the boundaries set? Because I'm looking at some of the stuff we've talked about in the past about, the commercial areas, and I see that, we're still looking, down mainly like a entrance into town, that area down there. Should that be more, outer core area? And then, the downtown core area going over towards the hospital some? I'm not making a.
Yeah, that's what the
judgmental-
conversation is about, is how do we do, I think it's fair to ask me any question you want. What I want to hear and what I want to have is a conversation amongst commissioners about what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. I can explain our thinking behind any one of these lines. But I'd rather hear, frankly, what your thinking is about these lines. So, when I experienced this, one of the big conversation pieces just earlier this week was, and seeing today's Tuesday, yesterday, was regarding that whole block around 3rd and Church where the parking lot is and the bank. That's an enormous space. Originally, I was thinking like this is an outer core type of a situation. Multifamily would be great here, supportive uses, ground floor right there next to downtown. And then as you stand it, on 2nd and begin looking south from Main Street, you really can visualize a continuation of a storefront retail space along that block. And I was convinced that's probably would be fine to write rules to help encourage that, over time. So it was very much walking the 4 corners of this, asking what the existing zoning was providing and what it wasn't, and really where could ground floor residential begin to start support your downtown? Because you don't want to bleed it out. You don't want to bleed this retail out too far. It just attenuates everything. You got all this. If retail represents activity, you spread it out over 200 acres. Well, imagine the activity if you spread that over 50, over 10. That's where you get activity, is you start to concentrate it.
Are we incentivizing people to come into this area or de-incentivize? I mean, if I wanted to build a 65-foot structure, I'd build it on 5th, on the west side of 5th.
If you want to build a 65-foot structure, the current commercial A lets you build that. This would not enable you to do that in the green or orange areas. You'd have to do it in the purple area.
Right, but so like what's going to bring me to the downtown core as opposed to the granary area? If I want to develop something, if I want to.
People want to be in downtowns because they're that hip and that's because they're hip and happening. That's why they want to be. That's why they want to be there.
Yeah. But my options are more limited then.
They are.
Yeah.
Yep. Any land use regulation is going to be. We have to be very careful with this, because you are going to send signals, and this signal is saying, yeah, we're not interested in that type of investment in this area. We're interested in that type of investment a little farther out. And this is why this assignment is so hard. We have to, it's about character. You take a look at the historic overlay here. How does a 65-foot tall building comport with a predominantly single story historic area? It's just incongruous from a lot of vantage points. So how do you square that? Well, what we've done with this is we've created a new height limit, and we've created a relational height limit. which means you're only going to go 3 stories if you're next to a single story, for example. And then if you're 2 stories, you can go all the way up to the full 45. This is signaling that there's a place in Sandpoint for taller buildings. Out there where the seasons are, on your way into town, it's not the same sort of fabric that you see, farther up Superior and along First. What you have adjacent to you as you enter on Superior is different than what you have adjacent to you when you're just a few blocks up the street. It's just a different environment. Powerhouse, courthouse, large parking lots, much wider right-of-way road coming right off the bridge. It may be, and I need to hear this from the commission and council and the community and everybody, it may be more appropriate to try to include a provision for taller buildings in those locations. And I would argue, as you start to go west in Commercial A, I think it's worth a good discussion. Is that the place for 65-foot tall buildings either, along Fifth? Is that what we want? Or if we do that, what distance to, what kind of relational height limitations can we put on those? Is 65 feet appropriate anywhere but the entryways and along the lake? Is that appropriate anywhere? So this is a first crack at trying to introduce just a little bit different thinking about our downtown. So these questions have to keep coming. What are the boundaries? What makes sense? This is something you're probably going to need to sleep on, whatever, but keep the questions coming. We walked this, we drove it, we've read the policy documents. We tried to ask ourselves what's there and what is all zoning is aspirational. What are we aspiring to? And where can we incentivize, some more multifamily to help support this smaller area that's supposed to be higher intensity?
One thing Bill has not mentioned is that in addition to the creation of these 2 proposed zoning districts, I've been working on an effort to create downtown design standards that are completely new, not related at all to our existing Commercial A design standards, so that new developments and redevelopment of existing structures within that downtown core and downtown outer core are held to a much more rigorous design standard that reflects the historic character of Sandpoint's original architecture. I've used several cities of similar size and historical character to Sandpoint as inspiration in the development of those design standards, and those will be coming to you in the future when we actually have some redlined and some new code language for you to consider.
I have a question about your thinking about schools in I think it was permitted in the downtown core area. And the thinking that I had was the balance between activity generating uses, which are, the primacy of this idea, and traffic and the impact, that people who need to use cars to create that activity or as part of that activity. And I live on the west side of town, and there's schools there. I mean, and at 3:15 in the afternoon, there's nothing but cars and people parking everywhere because there are no buses for these schools. And I'm just trying to picture if somebody, I don't know why they would, but somebody wanted to build a school, if that's what you mean, like a private school downtown, or do you mean like the music academy where there's 4 or 5 people at a time? I'm not quite sure.
Yeah. It's choice we have to make. I don't know, about a year ago, we had a school looking at a former real estate office building on Second. They ran into some expensive building remodel issues, but they had a very interesting pickup and drop off concept. They were working with neighboring property owners that had some parking lots. I think it can work. I don't think I don't think a public school is ever going to make that choice, right? I don't think they're ever going to do that. But private school, it varies in size. They vary. What they do is they bring people in the morning, they bring people in the afternoon, and then periodically they bring people in at night for events and things like that. It's up to that individual school to sort of figure that out, the pick up and drop off, right? A lot of that happens already in downtown. There's comings and goings of all types. one thing by having a bunch of kids around also is, you know, you're going to be activating your streets, your sidewalks. It's going to slow people down. It's again, that's what you want in your downtown. You're trying to create traffic. You're trying to do, what can you do to create foot traffic in your downtown? That's what you're trying to do.
No, I was talking about, just to be clear, I was talking about cars.
Right.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
So again, you get people coming and going with cars all day long, right? So it's worth a discussion if it's something that doesn't, you don't feel comfortable with. I mean, schools can take all kinds of forms. This is a school that, I don't know, had 50 kids maybe, and uh, they had a very interesting way for pickup and drop off that was nearby, and they were going to have a crossing guards. I think it was like 2 blocks away or so. They were going to use predominantly public parking by the parking lot to, you know, temporarily occupy some space, have crossing guards and school personnel help walk them back and forth. I thought, wow, what a great way to bring 200 people into your 300, 500 people into your downtown every week. You know, half those people are going to stop and get a coffee or, you know, maybe stop by and look at something they might not have seen. Trying to create opportunities for and excuses for people to come downtown. And schools is one way to do it, but you have to be careful with it. Schools might be an example of something that's maybe it's conditionally permitted because you've got these concerns, right? Maybe we elevate it to the commission to say, well, really, we want to really make sure we hone in on this on the traffic, you know, piece. So let's put some additional scrutiny behind this. And that's the whole point of a conditional use permit is the use may be okay in one location, but given its context may not be. That's the whole nature of a use permit, for example. That could easily be made a C for conditionally permitted, for example.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Are you planning on putting any conditional uses on any of the allowed uses here?
Well, I haven't yet, although I think the school might be one. Anytime there's a permit, it's a disincentive in itself. But I'm really big on getting the zoning right and getting the permit simple, right? I just think that gets conflated in the industry. Oh, let's just add a bunch of permits because that's going to give us a better outcome. No. You've still got the same rules.
We clarified, Bill, also that every new commercial development requires a site plan review permit at present.
If it's new construction, it does.
Correct. And
Now, a
additionally,
remodel wouldn't require that.
right. So,
In downtown, it's mostly remodels.
okay. The other trigger for the CUP currently is the 15,000 square foot. So any new construction exceeding 15,000 square feet would require a CUP.
But you could make a school, however big it is, you know, 2,000 square feet on up. You could say, look, school it's a great example. And I'm glad it was brought up. It's a great example of a land use issue. This use might be appropriate at this location, but it might not be given its context. And therefore, this permit, it's elevated here. There's a public hearing. You get to your testimony and make a decision based on, and you have the ability to condition the project, right? Oh, make sure you got 4 cross guards instead of 3, or whatever the rules might be. Those are the types of things that happen with conditional use permits. A church, for example, might fit in a neighborhood, but it might not, right? Giving, you know, those are great examples of, you know, why you would use a CUP for in a situation like that. But schools, you know, there's a lot of people involved in schools, and what we're trying to do is drive people to the downtown.
Still trying to wrap my head around the difference between commercial A zone and the outer core zone. Is it the distinction in the outer core is just allowing residential on that lower level?
Building heights,
In heights.
all the design standards you haven't seen yet, it's going to be significantly different design standards.
Okay.
We're gonna make things look downtowny.
Okay, that's helpful to wrap my head around. And so for the commercial A that's outside of that, all the purple that's still on the map, that still requires commercial use along
It
on the
does.
bottom floor.
It does.
Commercial A would allow residential on the ground floor.
It allows, commercial A allows,
Portion needs to be commercial.
it has to be commercial frontage, commercial on the ground floor. Is this I think you got to go up.
He's asking about residential. Is non-commercial allowed on the ground floor in commercial A outside of the downtown core? And the answer is yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
You have plans to revise that in this code? Like
Well-
changing it to maybe allow
Well, the whole thing's on the table. This exercise right now is trying to carve off what we think downtown is, write some great rules for that. And then once we're satisfied with that, say, okay, now what about the rest here with,
Yeah.
So I want to,
Further out.
I want us to focus on what I'm calling the core and the outer core first.
Okay.
So
And then go to the rest.
just to clarify, Commissioner Weber, currently multifamily residential is permitted in commercial A and commercial B, but only on upper floors.
Right.
The ground floor has to be, in fact, the language we use is non-residential. It doesn't actually say it has to be commercial space, which is why we've seen some applications come in with what I would describe as tokenistic non-residential space. In other words, empty space behind a storefront design. Then have no intention. It's costing the developer money to provide that empty space, but they don't view it as viable rentable retail space because we are over retailed in this town. We have 200 acres of commercial A.
And that's just
retail
commercial A.
space. So requiring additional development of commercial space, our code language doesn't even do that. It says a storefront character with non-residential space behind it. So what we see is empty space with fake storefront windows being proposed.
There's a ton of it.
So when the developer's given the opportunity to just provide, rentable or sellable residential space on the ground floor, we expect to see far more interest in investment in those commercial zones outside the downtown core and the outer core. Actually, the outer core would additionally allow some ground floor residential as well on this proposal.
Right.
But only commercial C allows ground floor residential without storefront or non-residential on the ground floor. And that's why you see projects like Homestead out on Highway 2, which is in commercial C, and you've got, every floor of that building is apartment space.
I think the weird thing is that if you have the downtown corridor, which must be, or the downtown zone, which must be commercial on the bottom floor, and then the outer core, which has the opportunity for mixed use or residential on the bottom floor, and then all of a sudden you step back to the commercial A and you can't have residential.
No, you would be able to. The proposal is to allow residential,
On the
multifamily
ground
residential on the ground.
On the ground floor.
Okay,
So
perfect.
Bill has struck out restricted,
And
which
permitted.
said only above ground floor, non-residential, and they'll just made it permitted.
Okay, just simply permitted.
okay.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you.
Clear on that.
Now, what's the difference between then a unit in commercial A and a unit in the outer core? Design standards. There will be far more robust design standards for a new unit or a redeveloped unit in the commercial core than there would be in the outer core than there would be in commercial A.
Right.
Because as you get away from the downtown core and the outer core, there's really not a historic character we're trying to preserve or necessarily promote. In certain districts, perhaps the Granary District maybe, but there are plenty of parts of Sandpoint where the Highway 2 corridor, the Fifth Avenue Highway 200 corridor, where perhaps that downtown aesthetic is not as
Well,
essential.
I'm going to be
Would be nice to impose it.
I'm going to be radical here and tell you maybe we have too much commercial A even after we do this exercise. If we do this exercise, maybe we have too much commercial B. Maybe we have too much commercial C. I think we need to. It's hard. Council really wants this in front of them for commercial A and historic. I'm going to say this every single meeting. That does not mean we take our hand off the chess piece for the rest of the work that would be needed to look at commercial B and C and the balance of A. I think that's going to come next if it happens. We just have a lot of work to do. There's lots of other concepts we can be using to describe Highway 2 as it goes through the city. What are some new ideas of thinking about that corridor? It's certainly there's newer ideas than commercial B and C. We can come up with different ways to look at this and write rules around it. And I think that would be a natural next exercise. But this is a flavor for taking a step in that direction. I think we need to be just more refined with our geographies. Not every place is the same.
I mean, when I was speaking about incentivizing people to come into the area, I mean, like part of the way you could do that is to limit commercial A around, to cut down the number of acres for commercial A.
100%. For a year now, I've been telling Jason, if we had resources, I would commission a forecast of demand for retail and office space for the next 20 years and just show the community how we've got enough land here for 100 years of it.
if you go walk around First Avenue right now, you're going to see about a half dozen vacant retail spaces. Some of them, recent businesses that have either relocated or gone out of business or the owner has passed away. You've got several vacant spaces right now. Why is it hard to fill those spaces? Because you go a quarter mile out in the periphery of commercial A and rents are probably half what they are downtown.
I can
So
tell you
how do
that.
we increase demand for that
So-
retail space
So
downtown?
those spaces on First Avenue are not rented because they're going to be developed, and this is going to
They're
have.
not rented or they are rented?
They're not rented, because the plan is for development,
So one real,
for ownership in this year.
one really basic way to think about downtowns anywhere, and I encourage you to do this when you go experience downtowns, whether that's, literally anywhere, is downtowns typically suffer from one flavor or another of the having a good donut or a good donut hole. You either have a great core and the donut surrounding that donut hole needs a lot of work, or you have a great donut and you've got a really bad donut hole. What's really unique about here is that we've got this great donut hole, this great core. Around it's not necessarily bad. There's just too much donut.
And we're getting 2 donut shops.
So that's and I honestly mean that the commercial zoning in this town is enormous. I think we can do better by beginning this, like, thinking about some refinements, and this is a first crack at it.
You're touching on a couple of questions or subjects that I had, and one is the concept of exclusivity, and that would sort of perhaps, add to value and therefore, and I'm speculating here because I don't know, but I guess in the form of a question, if we create exclusive areas that you can only do certain things in that area, and it just doesn't bleed out anywhere else. It's just there. And so if somebody wants to open a restaurant or a real estate office or something, they have to compete in this particular area. So one outcome of that would be to increase the value and promote redevelopment. Because you've mentioned redevelopment, and I'm kind of confused by what that really, when does an action constitute redevelopment? Is it adding it could be a million things, but I just don't know what that means. But I recognize that a lot of the buildings here, could use some redevelopment if we're trying to create sort of an environment that is historic and, attractive, that some buildings look like they need to be improved. Are we doing anything to create an exclusive environment that would promote the redevelopment of properties that look like they need to be redeveloped in the downtown core and outer core?
We have so much commercial space, and the changes, aside from the colors, are modest. I don't see how with just the enormity of the commercial space in this city. I don't know how you'd be. I don't think this creates an enormous incentive or market pressure for that to occur. I think there's a lot more that goes into real estate economics and development than just that. Location, right? There are lots of individual property owners' desires. There's all kinds of things that go into why someone is going to decide to make an improvement or change to their property. It's just, but zoning, if we were to take the purple area and make it houses, and take the salmon area and make that houses, now we're talking. Now you've created some real pressure for that downtown core. Now all of a sudden you've got it becomes more scarce, right? And what happens when you have the scarcity of the land for your retail space? Well, the market's going to respond, right? And you're going to see investment. This is a step in that direction because you're not requiring ground floor retail in the outer core, And again, I think we've got homework to do on the balance of commercial A, especially along the corridor and on the west side of Fifth. But yeah, there's no one quick silver bullet answer to your question. I mean, we're trying to, we could be more extreme. We could shrink the green area, enlarge the salmon area, make it more restrictive in the green, eliminate half of the allowable land uses on the table that we've shown you. And now you're forcing, that area of the city to be the collection spot for those land uses, and together with prohibiting them elsewhere. That's what zoning is. I mean, you can't do any of this stuff in your neighborhood where you live. That's just because the color on the map is white instead of green. Are we on the right track here? Is this still too much to,
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner
from my standpoint, I think we're on the right track. I think that just looking at the boundaries, I think we may want to look at internally, if those are the correct boundaries. But I think this is a good step in trying to resolve some of our downtown issues and hopefully draw more commercial into it. That's going to be the key. Is it going to draw more in, or is it going to chase them away?
I think in the beginning, I was a little on guard that this was going to be something that was going to be very restrictive to development or to, are people going to want to, are business owners going to want to be there, or are they going to want to invest in it? And is it going to bring people in? Because that's what they want, I mean, why would you want a commercial zone that is not busy? I think I said it in the last week that nobody should be shocked to see no parking downtown because it should be busy. So however many parking spots we put in, I mean, they should always all be full, right? If there's no parking spots, that doesn't mean that people aren't going to be there, in my opinion, because I just happened to spend a few hours on Rodeo Drive this weekend, and I was shocked to see that there was no parking. Tons of people, and it's not a very big area, and it's world famous, of course, but not that this is the same thing, but your donut hole, comment really does make a lot of sense to me, where the areas around it will benefit if we have something that's somewhat exclusive. It's not the same as the other commercial areas in the county, right? Like just north of us, we are competing. These businesses are competing with those areas if they're the same. If they're offering the exact same thing as what other commercial districts offer, then there's nothing really there to draw them. So, is it a place that I personally am going to spend a lot of time at? Maybe not. But, I'm not a tourist either, and I'm not, I'm not I'm not the customer for this area, maybe. So I think we are getting close to something that would be meaningful. And the residential part on the ground, on the street level does, I don't know how I feel about that. I guess I can't really wrap my head around it. But that is a big change. So I guess I'd have to see what the feedback is on that. I don't know. Normally I would have an opinion, but I guess I just have to see how it's set up in other places. I was trying to imagine where have I been where that's the case, and I just keep coming back with like hotels. Hotels in downtown areas are usually very common, and and they're busy. And I'm not aware of a hotel in the core.
not yet?
Yeah, not yet,
Yeah.
but maybe. Yeah, I mean, I think that a hotel fits in there very well. But I guess that's not residential.
Going back to Commissioner Torpy's question about our idea about this kind of exclusivity of a particular district. Of course, these changes are going to happen over decades, but if there's an additional unit or 10 units of residential in that outer core, on the ground floor, you say, oh, well, man, what have we done? We could have had a restaurant on the ground floor, a commercial space, but we've now allowed residential. But if every one of those residences has 2.5, 3 people living in it, which is the average in Sandpoint, there's 30 additional customers for those restaurants that exist in the downtown core or elsewhere on the ground floor in the outer core. So what are you doing? You're creating more exclusivity by shifting that demand curve out for those services and those restaurants and the retail and the entertainment venues in the downtown core and the outer core. So one thing we can try to do over decades through our work today is shift that balance between the demand side and the supply side for commercial in Sandpoint. Right now, it's very imbalanced towards supply. The supply of commercial space far exceeds the demand for commercial space, and there's not an exclusivity anywhere, which is why so many businesses choose to locate themselves in Ponderay or out on the where the rent is super cheap on the periphery of our commercial zoning districts. So to create that vibrant, exclusive, lively downtown area, we want to take steps today that will allow, if the market demands it, if the market moves in that direction, for more heartbeats downtown, as the mayor likes to say. Heartbeats downtown create a vibrant, exclusive district where people want to be. And going back to Commissioner Dunkel's example of the parking, yeah, I mean, strained parking is evidence of a healthy place. Of course, people will complain all day if they feel like they are inconvenienced, but would you rather go to where parking is ample and walk across an empty parking lot in Ponderay or come downtown Sandpoint and have an actual experience?
I'll say last night downtown, there was hardly any spots to park, so
Yeah.
it was busy.
I mean, personally, I love the idea of residential in the in the outer core. I mean, I'm thinking of like cities like Annapolis, Maryland, or something like that, where you do have residential interspersed with retail. Could be, some of it's residential on second floor, some of it's on the first floor. I think that would be a great addition to the downtown. I mean, to the greater downtown area.
Well, there's a lot to think about. What we're going to do is we're going to make some refinements. I'm going to think a little bit about schools and whether or not a CP might be appropriate. For example, think a little bit more about these boundaries, walk it again. And then, again, it's my biggest impression is that we just are so over commercialed in this city that we have got to start taking some steps to refine it. And this is a modest step. This is really, more about building heights than and creating some opportunity for residential. Those are the two biggies that come out of this. But actually, the biggest thing that comes out of this is that we're taking a step to saying, this is our downtown. We're labeling it. This is what we mean by downtown. And once you begin to think like that, then new ideas start to pop into your head and new ways of organizing ourselves come into play.
I think by our next meeting, we'll probably have some design standards we can.
Yeah, we'll probably have a draft of the whole of commercial A. It's mostly done. We'll probably have that ready to go. What I mean by that is the creation of these two new zone districts and all these standards. We'll probably have that ready in red line, so you can see the whole of it in one shot. And then we're going to spend time on it like we did with parking to make sure that it's ready to move on to council.
Should any part of the shoreline with Sand Creek have, I don't know, either some kind of different, I'll call it special maybe, but different design standards or permitting requirements? Because it is so special. I mean,
It
is-
does. We created some stuff I think you're going to like. Let's
Okay.
look at it. We've done exactly that.
Okay.
Tonight we wanted to showcase the big ones. We're creating some new areas, new zones. Rezoning property is what this would represent. We're having an historic district in there. It's going to be full-fledged. Building heights, we're taking a stab at what we think we've heard for the last year and a half, listening to the community about this issue. And the rest is going to be brought to you in a couple weeks.
Can I ask Zach a question? So say you're a real estate agent and you're selling property on First Avenue that with the person buys it as commercial A, and then and then these changes happen. I mean, like, how do we deal with that? Because, like you impose this onto a group of people or.
Yeah, we do it all the time. It happens. I mean, this is what, that's why we have planning commission and these are legislative acts.
I just wonder because.
Of the current code unless they get their application in prior.
Before.
So, but if, a diligent buyer, like, Bill said, is going to be paying attention to these or should be paying attention to these hearings so they can see the trajectory of where we're going.
But it happens all the time. We have to we take it very seriously. You know, we have to humble ourselves to, we were talking about property rights, we're talking about rules that govern private property. That's what zoning is. And it's a lot of things. We have to be very careful with it, very purposeful. There's a reason why you have hearings and there's due process and, you need to hear from the community as you go forward and do this, but make no mistake, this happens day in and day out in cities across the country where you're making decisions, trying to, take stock of where you are, where you want to go, and make zoning changes. Happens all the time. I mean, this is I would argue a principal function of a planning commission is to evaluate your zoning and make suggested changes.
Can I also ask a question about like the historic overlay district? Where the music conservatory is, I can't remember the name of that building, but that's in this and then across the street where POAC is, which is not a historic building. It's
It is.
Is it?
Yeah, there's
I mean, like that little low-lying concrete building?
we're going to have a separate session on historic with you after we have a session with the Arts, Culture, and Historic Preservation Commission. What we've drafted is an ordinance that identifies the district, but also recognizes that half of the structures in it are what are contributing, the other half are non-contributing. But this is a district that's been formed through professional surveys done by architects and then listed on the National Registry. So as a means to start by locally adopting and locally enforcing historic preservation, I didn't want to jump into the discussion of the boundary. But what we will discern in the ordinance is the difference in what it means to be a contributing resource versus a non-contributing resource, and what rules apply where that line falls. Why or how these buildings were placed in there was done by the legwork of previous staff and commissions to get to that point.
I'll just say generally, I think that this is in alignment with what the city of Sandpoint citizens have expressed for quite a while with downtown core and building heights and scaling things down, especially as you get closer to the water. And then, yeah, where it makes sense kind of further back where there is less kind of this precious downtown pedestrian, really friendly streetscape, building taller, building higher, makes a lot of sense too. So I think, yeah, in general, I'm curious what the details are gonna show next and where they get into the details with you next time. For example, like on the relational building height, I had a question about how that works, and yeah, a lot of stuff I'm sure will come to light soon.
Well, there's no monopoly on good or bad ideas, so we need to have these meetings so we can all just be frank with one another.
I wonder if our other commissioner on Zoom has any questions, since he was muted.
Is Commissioner Reimar still?
He's still present, but he hasn't raised his hand
Oh, okay.
in any way.
Ivan, if you want to speak, you have the opportunity right now. Anybody else? Ellie, would you like to, do you have anything to add or any comments?
It addresses.
Come up to the podium, Ellie.
Yeah, please.
Thanks.
For the record, who are you? And
Record, I'm Ellie Sussness. I'm the chair of Sandpoint Art, Culture, and Historic Preservation Commission. And this is the first I'm hearing about the concept of the downtown core and the downtown outer core, and I think it is a very effective way of dealing with a lot of the issues that we were running into with those exact things. What is the historic overlay? What are contributing? How do we address including the things that aren't in that historic overlay district? So I am very happy with what Bill and Jason have presented, and I am looking forward to the details. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I think the discussion is wrapping up. And if there, anybody has anything else to add, now's the time. Okay, let's move on to other items, general matters that staff would like to bring to our attention of the commission at this time.
Yeah, we're gonna have some permits for you in the coming months, and the work you did in the fall between September and December will be coming to city council at the end of this month. So we'll be bringing the STR and the Title IX amendments that were recommended on December 18th to city council in a couple weeks. So thank you for all your work on that.
Okay, do commissioners have any roundtable topics for discussion?
I just got one question, just, is there a way of getting that new zoning map sent to us?
I will have Mandy post it to with the meeting minutes tomorrow.
Okay,
I'll just
thank you.
post this presentation as a PDF so that you can download that.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah, it'd be good. I foresee some possibility of real estate agents showing up at the next hearing.
I had to find a way to make sure he was listening and participating, so I think I found it.
Eric Skinner's gonna be up here.
Yeah, yeah, maybe attorneys too.
Attorneys, yeah,
We've
Steve
covered
will be
all-
here.
Probably have a lawsuit by tomorrow morning.
Yays.
Yeah.
What are they?
Okay, with no further business, we will adjourn the meeting at 6:56.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ivan.
Thanks, Ivan.
Thanks, Matt.